Now that we've got our Illustrator file set up, we can start adding content. You can see here that we've got the file set up with 3 different layers, one of which doesn't print. On that layer we have just guides, so it's just these guidelines, and then if we were to turn the guides off, which is a command semicolon, we can see the dash line box that we've created, and both of these just represent the safety area. We can also turn that layer off to see without it. Then we have a layer just for our background, and that's so that we can lock this big rectangle that has our background color in it, and that way we can still interact with the content without moving that shape around by accident. And then the next thing we can do is work on a content layer. We want to put all of our shapes and text on the same layer because they interact with each other, and so it doesn't make sense to have a separate layer for shapes and a different layer for text because we need them to work together. So I'm going to start working on my content layer now with both of my other layers locked, and I can start bringing in the content. Now, if we refer back to our diagram that we've been given, everything pretty much needs to be aligned on center. And so we're going to be using a lot of centered text, but we also just need to make sure that everything is aligned evenly and distributed evenly across the page so that we get some balance on the page. Other than that, we have our own freedom of choice as far as colors that we're using or typefaces that we're using. It's mostly just about the layout that we need to make sure that we're consistent here. So I'm going to move now to my provided text, which exists in a Google Doc here. And the one thing that I want to make sure I do before I bring this text into Illustrator, if you notice when you're looking at this document, I can see all of these formatting options across the top where I can change the typeface, I can make it bold, I can make it bigger, I can change the color. This is called rich text formatting, and anytime you're working in a software program that has these options across the top, that means that you're working with rich text. What rich text does is that there is formatting that's being applied in the background that gives this text hierarchy and style, basically. And that's a good thing, except when you're creating something as a designer, you need to know that not all rich text programs play well together. And so sometimes that code that's being added in the background doesn't work as well in a different software. So whenever I see that I'm working with rich text, before I bring this text into a different rich text program, say Adobe Illustrator, which also has these options to format type, I need to remove all of that formatting from the background just so that it doesn't potentially crash my program or cause me unnecessary problems while I'm doing my work. So the way you do that is just to take all of your text and to copy it, and then you want to paste it into a plain text application. So a plain text application just doesn't have all those formatting options. On a PC, your native plain text application is called Notepad. And if you open up Notepad and you paste this text in it, all the text will be moved to the same size, and there won't be bold, there won't be any different typefaces. It'll look kind of boring, but it'll be cleaned of all the formatting, which is a good thing. On a Mac, my native application for formatting text is called TextEdit. And when I open TextEdit, now if you need to find it, it's in your utilities of your applications folder, by the way. So come to your applications folder and, oh, they've taken it out actually. Text is now just in the apps. So you come here to find it. But notice when I open TextEdit, I'm at a slight disadvantage because I still see formatting options across the top. So TextEdit can toggle between rich text and plain text, whereas on a PC, the Notepad application is just plain text. So it's actually easier to use in this case. But I can make TextEdit plain text. All I have to do is come up to my Format menu and choose Make Plain Text. This is another one where learning keystroke commands can be helpful though too. This stands for Shift, Control, and T. So I could choose that from the drop-down menu, or I could hold down Command, actually on a Mac, Shift, and T. And that takes it to plain text. You see how my formatting options disappeared, so I can't make the text bold anymore. I can't change the typeface. So this is rich text, and then this is plain text. When I paste this in, you can see now that I don't have all of this hierarchy in my text. I don't have the headings anymore. All of the text is the same size. It's a monospace face, so it looks like a computer, kind of an old school computer type of typeface as well. And what this is going to allow me to do is to add my own formatting in Illustrator. So it has me repeating my efforts a little bit, whereas if I copy pasted this directly into Illustrator, some of this formatting might be preserved. But the thing about that is some of this formatting might also crash Illustrator and it might corrupt my file. So what I'm going to do is work from my plain text version. I'm going to copy all of this text and I'm going to come back to Illustrator. And for now, I'm just going to open up a text box off in the corner over here where I can move the text in as I need to. To do that, I'm going to make sure that I select my text tool, but instead of just clicking and putting a cursor here and pasting my content in, I want to create a text box. Let me show you why. So if I take this text now that I've put in here, you can see it's come in and it's legible and it makes sense. But if I come back to my selection tool, which is the black arrow here, if I were to resize this text box in some way, you see how the text is not treated as separate from the box. And so when I move it, my text just got distorted and it's harder to read now. And we don't want that to happen. So I am going to Command Z my way back out of this. And what I need to do instead of just putting my type tool on my artboard or my pasteboard is I need to draw a text box. So if I select my text tool, and this time I click and drag, and I draw a box first, then when I paste my text in, you'll notice that the box is for the most part treated as separate from the text itself. So the text doesn't change when I change the size of the box. That's what I want. I think that's one of the most confusing things about working with Illustrator when you first start, but it's really important to do. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can start putting some text on the page. And what I usually see at this level of your use of Illustrator as a student is that each piece of text is put on here individually. When you do that, you're working a lot harder than you need to be, because then it's harder to make the text aware of, the other text on the page. So we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to have a couple of text boxes, but we're not going to have individual ones for each piece of text. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my poster's title and this introductory paragraph, and I'm going to put them in a text box together at the top of the poster. I could do this by clicking and dragging, but again, that creates extra work for me and can sometimes be harder. An easier way for me to select that text would be to put my cursor at the very beginning of the text that I want, where it's blinking in front of the poster title. And then let go of my mouse altogether, not be holding down or clicking or anything, and just hover over the text at the end that I want to select, hold down Shift and click. And that'll select all of it. Now, the reason that this is important is because something that you may or may not be aware of yet is that all rich text has hidden characters and hidden formatting, right? So when I come to my type menu and I show my hidden characters, I can see all of the hidden characters that are formatting this text. And if I don't select these hidden characters along with the rest of the text, that can sometimes cause issues that are hard to identify if you're not aware of what's going on. So once you become a pretty professional designer, you're going to be working with your hidden characters on all the time. You're going to want to see them, but when you first see them, it can look a little jarring. So again, to select this text, I'm going to put my cursor at the beginning of the text I want to select, in this case, the title, and then I'm going to hover over the end of the text that I want to select. I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to click, and that's going to select all of the text, hidden characters included. And then I can choose Command X to cut that text out. And now I'm going to come over to my poster. I'm going to make sure I'm working on my content layer, and I'm going to draw another text box to hold the text that I just clipped to my clipboard. For now, I don't need these layers open, so I'm going to collapse some of these things. If I want to keep something open, I can click and hold and add it to one of my toolbars here. So now my stroke panel won't disappear on me. And I'm just going to choose my type tool. And for now, I am going to just click and drag across maybe the top quarter of the page, try to stay within my safety area. And this is lorem ipsum. This is Latin text that gets put in just as placeholder. It doesn't make any sense, so that way you don't read too much into it. And Illustrator started putting this in by default, but I don't need it. I'm just going to make sure it's all selected, and I'm going to Command V to paste my text in. And we can see that I can see the text that I copied now. Now, one thing I don't like is that it's actually all up against the edge of my safety area. And this is like the farthest that I should go out on the page, but I'd actually like to move it in just a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my text box just a little bit. I'm going to move this one in to where it's actually sitting about an inch off the top of the page for now. And then I also want this to come in a little bit, but I would like for it to be an even number. So I can do that using my properties panel, and again using, the width and the height, or the X and the Y that are at the top here. But I want you to pay attention to this little square here, because this doesn't look interactive at first, but it is. And it's really important to pay attention to this when it shows up in the software. This allows you to select a reference point on the thing that you're working with. So in this case, since I have selected this box full of text, I can choose to use the corners or the center of any of the sides as a reference point. And right now, if I were to resize this box with this reference point being chosen, then depending on the changes that I make, everything's going to move towards that reference point, and this is going to stay fixed and not move. And what I really want to do is move these off of both edges, but keep the box centered. So what I could do is change my reference point to one of these center points. I'm just going to go with the top center. And I can see that I didn't quite get to my Y at 1 inch, right? It's slightly off. So I could change that now to where the height is an even 1 inch. It's not necessary, but it's good to be precise. And then I can come to my Align tools, and I can make sure that this text box is actually on the center of the page by clicking Align Center. And now, instead of having this text box span all the way to the safety area, which is around 10.5 inches, I'm going to make it closer to 10 inches. So I'm just going to type 10 inches in as the width. And when I do that, because my reference point is in the center, both of these sides are going to move in. If I had done it with my reference point over here, for example, here, let me undo and show you. So if I made that change and my reference point was here, and I type in 10, everything's going to move in from over here. And you see, that's not what I wanted. I wanted it to be centered. So what I can do instead, I'm just doing Command Z to get back to where it was. There we go. Okay, I'm going to change my reference point again to the top center. And now when I change this to 10 inches, both sides will move in an equal amount so that it's off of the edges a little bit. And I actually feel like that's still just a little bit too wide for what I've got here. So I'm going to move this into maybe 9.5 instead. And that's starting to feel a little bit better. The text seems to be changing too as I'm doing that, so I want to be sensitive to that. What I'm going to do now is, in my properties panel, I'm going to check out my character menu here, and I'm going to choose more options so I can see what's going on. And I just want to make sure that my height and my width, as far as the scale goes, are at 100%. And in this case, they are. So now I could go ahead and start working on the size of the text to start creating that hierarchy. We know the title needs to be the biggest, boldest thing on the page. And now I think a lot of us would probably start in a way that makes sense here, where we would be changing these things by the individual piece of text that we're styling. And it's okay to start that way, but then we're going to want to move to what are called style sheets that help us to control the consistency of those styles across the page. What I'm going to do first is start working on my title. And again, instead of clicking and dragging, I want to either put my cursor at the beginning and then shift click to select, or in this case, it'd be even easier to just triple click, and that selects the whole paragraph. And what I want to do now is come to my paragraph menu, and I'm going to select centered text, and then I can move to my character menu. Right now, I'm not too worried about typefaces yet, so I'm just going to leave it as Myriad Pro for now, which is just the default. And we'll use style sheets to determine our typefaces from there. But I am going to make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to choose one of the preset sizes here. 48 feels a little too big. We'll just go with 36. And then I can come down here and I can triple click to select this paragraph and do the same thing. I'll come to my paragraph menu, center my text, and then I can come to my character menu and I can resize this text to be just a little bit bigger. Not quite as big as the title, but since this is kind of call out text, I do want it to be fairly big. So I'm going to go with 18. And then I'm going to change what's called the leading. That's the space between the lines in the paragraph here. And I do that right here. And I'm going to choose a little bit more generous leading just so there's more space in between. 36 is a bit too much. 24 actually feels like a bit too little, so I'm going to go somewhere in between. We're going to go for about 30. And that's a little bit better. It actually feels a little too much too. Let's go maybe 28. And I think the reason that I see a lot of students putting the title in a separate text box from this paragraph is so you can control how much space is in between them. But that's actually working a lot harder than you need to. What we can do instead is triple click our paragraph. And in our paragraph menu here, I have the option to specify how much space should be after this paragraph. So I'm going to do that. And for now, again, I'm going to do it just based on visual judgment. Go for about 10. Let's see, that way I don't have to continue moving these separately and trying to align them separately. I know this text box is centered on the page horizontally, and I know now that both of these paragraphs are centered, so that means they're centered on the page too. And then I know that the space off of this one is set up consistently to where when I create the next poster in the series, I have a frame of reference for how much space should be here, and I can keep it more consistent that way. So now that I've got my title set up, I'm ready to start bringing in my shapes and all of their descriptions. And this is where we're going to want to talk about style sheets, and it's going to make a little bit more sense. So let's pick up on that in another video, and we'll be pretty close to getting done with this.